Hey guys, and welcome back! I'm Simon, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. For today's video, we won't be discussing any particular lore topic, but rather the general idea of the Gatewatch on Kaladesh, and their involvement in the story going on there. Now, the Gatewatch at the point of its conception was always going to play a big role in the story arcs to come, at least for the foreseeable future. I mean, a group of Planeswalkers working together to end threats? How can you possibly ignore it, right? Well, the first couple blocks from Zendikar to Innistrad, the Gatewatch looked to be a reasonable response to a high-level threat, that being the Eldrazi Titans. But, moving on to the much less plain-threatened world of Kaladesh, the Gatewatch's involvement seems a bit overkill, and in a way, it feels kinda shoehorned in. When the first official articles for Kaladesh started coming out, and we discovered what drew Chandra there in the first place, it looked as if the majority of the Gatewatch were gonna take a little break. After all, Kaladesh is deeply connected to Chandra Nalaar, while basically being unknown to the other Planeswalkers. Not to mention, the story Chandra was embarking on would prove to be incredibly personal. So, as she ran off with only Liliana Vess tagging along, I thought it would be a great development for a relatively new plane that only a few members of the Gatewatch actually are getting involved. But alas, the Gatewatch is just too powerful of a plot point to be ignored, even on Kaladesh. And, of course, the whole dang group eventually found themselves on the plane. Not only did we get the entire freaking Gatewatch, but those Planeswalkers were met with even more Planeswalkers when they bumped into Ajani Goldmane and Saheeli Rai. Ajani actually joining the Gatewatch himself. But that wasn't it. We had two more Planeswalkers involved in the story, after you add the main villain, Tezzeret, and his henchman slash just doing his job and forgettable Davin Bane. That's a total of 9 Planeswalkers all involved in some capacity to the story of Kaladesh. And here I thought it would be a simpler tale of Chandra coming to terms with her past and helping her home. So why do I see this as an issue? More Planeswalkers means more action, right? Well, not really. Since there were so many quote-unquote important characters on Kaladesh, there just wasn't enough time or cardboard to cover them all in the block. This is true for the story in that all these players are involved, but some are rarely even mentioned. In any given story, you may hear something about Ajani, or Jace, or even Liliana, but it'll mostly focus on 1 or 2 characters. This leaves a vast majority of the Planeswalkers involved without much context. They're basically just standing around, awaiting orders like grunts. If anything, it takes away from their character development. Let's not forget what brought all these Planeswalkers to Kaladesh in the first place. Remember, the Gatewatch originally didn't want to get involved because there was no appropriate threat. Kaladesh was in the throes of a political revolution, certainly not the interplanar threat the Gatewatch was designed for. But of course, Chandra goes and gets herself in trouble and the Gatewatch have to protect their friend. Blah blah blah, and here we are. Sure, eventually Tezzeret was shown to be behind everything going on, and yes, he's a Planeswalker, and thus a quote interplanar threat. But still, it's a far cry from the Eldrazi Titans. But if protecting or tagging along with whatever one of their members may deem is important is the only requirement for the Gatewatch, well, then they'll be getting involved with a lot of trivial stuff, especially as their number of members grows. This really dilutes the purpose of the Gatewatch, and kinda uses them as a cure-all, which will come to be a recipe for stale-aster. You know, a disaster that becomes stale. Although this idea of helping its members being on par with helping the multiverse does push the narrative of Liliana Vess, who plans to use her new friends to get rid of her remaining demon lords, or perhaps something more malicious. So I'm at least excited to see where that leads. Yet, when you have a super powerful group of Planeswalkers helping with essentially the chores of its members, you start to get some real one-sided fights. Sure, the Eldrazi Titans fighting with 4 or 5 Planeswalkers is an epic confrontation, but when you have 7 Planeswalkers working alongside an army of revolutionaries fighting against 1, maybe 2 Planeswalkers, you start to think to yourself, yeah, this shouldn't last long. And you're not wrong. Logically, this fight shouldn't even be a fight, but since they don't want the story to end in about 2 seconds flat, they had to artificially lengthen and make the fight trickier for the Gatewatch. Personally, I feel like this was a big misstep for the story. If you're going to have a threat of this level, it should be met with a force that ideally wouldn't steamroll it. Having this many Planeswalkers also leaves our physical cards bereft of their influence as well. Just think back to the number of cards featuring members of the Gatewatch across Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. It's a lot smaller than the previous blocks the team was featured in. Of course you have their actual Planeswalker cards, those are given, but what about the spells and creatures that make up the rest of the set? Where do the Gatewatch appear in those? Well, for Kaladesh, you have cards like Attune with Nature featuring Nissa Ravane, Chandra's Pyrohelix and Furious Reprisal showing Chandra Nalaar, Diabolical Tutor with Chandra and Liliana, and of course the big reveal of the Gatewatch and Ajani in Dramatic Reversal and Impeccable Timing. So, one or two cards with multiple members on it compared to the number we had in previous sets. But that's okay, the Gatewatch became more involved in Aether Revolt, so did they appear in more cards there? Well, we got Heroic Intervention with Ajani, Death Dismissal with Gideon, Chandra's Revolution, of course, featuring Chandra, then Oath of Ajani and the Planeswalker cards. So yeah, even less of a presence on the cards of Aether Revolt than Kaladesh. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that other native characters deserve the spotlight on cards more than anything else. But when you shoehorn the Gatewatch into this conflict, you could at least show them making moves on the cards, when in the story, they're barely an afterthought. If you're choosing to have them involved, yet making them a side note, at least we could see some awesome images of them blowing stuff up, but alas, not much is here. Now, despite all my various issues with the story of Kaladesh and Aether Revolt, I'm not saying it's unenjoyable. In fact, I'm really enjoying the aesthetic of Kaladesh and the struggle between government and common, oppressed people. It's just when they mention the Gatewatch and the numerous Planeswalkers that I cringe just a little bit. Oh, and Tezzeret as a villain is also pretty poorly fleshed out and is made almost completely unrelatable to readers. But that's a discussion for another video. I see the story of Kaladesh as a lesson to be learned moving forward in MTG, that if the Gatewatch are here to stay, then we must learn when and how to use them in the lore effectively. We can't send an army to deal with a mouse. Hopefully, it's something we'll see done better as we move forward. Anyway, those are just some of my thoughts on the Gatewatch in Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. Let me know your own thoughts in the comments below. Do I have a point, or am I completely awful in this one? If you enjoyed the video and want to see more, consider throwing it a like, sharing it with friends, and subscribing for all the latest MTG news and lore. As always guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.